Hello, and welcome back to Baby Elias's stories. We now return to Guards by Terry Pratchett. Part 7. It was quiet and warm in the watch house. Carrot listened to the hissing of sand in the hourglass and concentrated on buffing up his breastplate. Centuries of tarnish had given up under his cheerful onslaught. It gleamed. You knew where you were with a shiny breastplate. The strangeness of the city, where they had all these laws and concentrated on ignoring them, was too much for him. But a shiny breastplate was a breastplate well shined. The door opened. He peered across the top of the ancient desk. There was no one there. He tried a few more industrious rubs. There was the vague sound of someone who had got fed up with waiting. Two purple finger-nailed hands grasped the edge of the desk, and the librarian's face rose slowly into view like an early morning coconut. "Orc," he said. Carrot stared. It had been explained to him carefully that, contrary to appearances, laws governing the animal kingdom did not apply to the librarian. On the other hand, the librarian himself was never very interested in obeying the laws governing the human kingdom either. He was one of those little anomalies you have to build around. "Hello," said Carrot uncertainly. "Don't call him boy or pat him. That always gets him annoyed." "Ook!" The librarian prodded the desk with a long, many-jointed finger. "What?" "Ook!" "Sorry." The librarian rolled his eyes. It was strange, he felt, that so-called intelligent dogs, horses, and dolphins never had any difficulty indicating to humans the vital news of the moment, e.g., that the 3 children were lost in the cave, or the train was about to take the line leading to the bridge that had been washed away, or similar, while he, only a handful of chromosomes away from wearing a vest, found it difficult to persuade the average human to come in out of the rain. You just couldn't talk to some people. "Orc," he said and beckoned. "I can't leave the office," said Carrot. "I've had orders." The librarian's upper lip rolled back like a blind. "Is that a smile?" said Carrot. The librarian shook his head. "Someone hasn't committed a crime, have they?" said Carrot. "Ook! A bad crime? Ook! Like murder? Eek! Worse than murder! Eek!" The librarian knuckled over to the door and bounced up and down urgently. Carrot gulped. Orders were orders, yes, but this was something else. The people in this city were capable of anything. He buckled on his breastplate, clink, 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 screwed his sparkling helmet, swing, onto his head, and strode towards the door. Bum, 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 bum. Then he remembered his responsibilities. He went back to the desk, found a scrap of paper, and painstakingly wrote, "Out fighting crime. Please call again later. Thank you." And then he went out onto the streets, untarnished and unafraid. The Supreme Grand Master raised his arms. "Brethren," he said, "let us begin." It was so easy. All you had to do was channel that great septic reservoir of jealousy and cringing resentment that the brothers had in such abundance. Harness their dreadful mundane unpleasantness, which had a force greater in its way than roaring evil, and then open your own mind into the place where the dragons went. Vimes found himself grabbed by the arm and pulled inside. The heavy door shut behind him with a definite click. Click! "It's Lord Mountjoy Gayscale Talon-thrust the Third of Ankh," said the apparition, which was dressed in huge and fearsomely padded armor. "You know, I really don't think he can cut the mustard." "He can't," said Vimes, backing away. "It really needs two of you." "It does, doesn't it?" whispered Vimes, his shoulder blades trying to carve their way out through the fence. "Could you oblige?" boomed the thing. "What?" "Oh, don't be squeamish, man. You just have to help him up into the air. It's me who has the tricky part. I know it's cruel, but if he can't manage it tonight, then he's for the choppy chop. Survival of the fittest and all that, don't you know?" Captain Vimes managed to get a grip on himself. He was clearly in the presence of some sex-crazed would-be murderers, insofar as any gender could be determined under the strange lumpy garments. If it wasn't female, then reference to "it's me who has the tricky part" gave rise to mental images that would haunt him for some time to come. He knew the rich did things differently, but this was going too far. "Madam," he said coldly, "I am an officer of the watch, and I must warn you that the course of action you are suggesting breaks the laws of the city, and also of several of the more straight-laced gods," he added silently. "And I must advise you that his lordship should be released unharmed immediately." The figure stared at him in astonishment. "Why?" it said. "It's my bloody dragon." "Have another drink, not Corporal Nobby," said Sergeant Colin unsteadily. "I do not mind if I do, not Sergeant Colin," said Nobby. They were taking inconspicuosity seriously. That ruled out most of the taverns on the Moorpork side of the river, where they were very well known. Now they were in a rather elegant one in downtown Ankh, where they were being as unobtrusive as they knew how. The other drinkers thought they were some kind of cabaret. "I was thinking," said Sergeant Colin. "What?" "If we bought a bottle or two, we could go home and then we'd be really inconspicuous." Nobby gave this some thought. "But he said, we've got to keep our ears open," he said. "We're supposed to. What he said, detect anything." "We can do that at my house," said Sergeant Colin. "We could listen all night, really hard." "That's a good point," said Nobby. In fact, it sounded better and better the more he thought about it. "But first," he announced, "I got to pay a visit." "Me too," said the sergeant. "This detecting business gets to you after a while, doesn't it?" They stumbled out into the alley behind the tavern. There was a full moon up, but a few rags of scruffy cloud were drifting across it. The pair inconspicuously bumped into one another in the darkness. "Is that you, Detector Sergeant Cullen?" said Nobby. "That's right. Now can you detect the door to the privy, Detector Corporal Nobbs?" "We're looking for a short, dark door of mean appearance." There were a couple of clanks and a muffled swear word from Nobby as he staggered across the alley, followed by a yowl when one of Ankh-Morpork's enormous population of feral cats fled between his legs. "Who loves you, pussycat?" said Nobby under his breath. "Needs must then," said Sergeant Cullen, and faced a handy corner. His private musings were interrupted by a grunt from the corporal. "You there, Sergeant?" "Detector Sergeant to you, Nobby," said Sergeant Cullen pleasantly. Nobby's tone was urgent and suddenly very sober. "Don't piss about, Sergeant. I just saw a dragon fly over." "I've seen a horse fly," said Sergeant Cullen, hiccuping gently. "And I've seen a horse fly. I've even seen a green fly. But I ain't never seen a dragon fly." "Of course you have, you pillock," said Nobby urgently. "Look, I'm not messing about. We had wings on him. He had wings on him, like great big wings." Sergeant Cullen turned majestically. The corporal's face had gone so white that it showed up in the darkness. "Honest, Sergeant!" Sergeant Cullen turned his eyes to the damp sky and the rain-washed moon. "All right," he said. "Show me." There was a slithering noise behind him, and a couple of roof tiles smashed onto the street. He turned, and there, on the roof, was the dragon. "There's a dragon on the roof!" he warbled. "Nobby, it's a dragon on the roof! What shall I do, Nobby? There's a dragon on the roof! It's looking right at me, Nobby!" "For a start, you could do your trousers up," said Nobby from behind the nearest wall. Even shorn of her layers of protective clothing, Lady Sybil Ramkin was still toweringly big. Vimes knew that the barbarian Hublander folk had legends about great chain-mailed, armor-brad, cart-horse-riding maidens who swooped down on the battlefields and carried off dead warriors on their cropper to a glorious, roistering afterlife, while singing in a pleasing mezzo-soprano. Lady Ramkin could have been one of them. She could have led them. She could have carried off a battalion when she spoke. Every word was like a hearty slap on the back and clanged with the aristocratic self-assurance of the totally well-bred. The vowel sounds alone would have cut teak. Teak, hard, durable timber used in shipbuilding and for making furniture. Teak. The vowel sounds alone would have cut teak. Vimes's ragged forebears were used to voices like that, usually from heavily armored people on the back of a war charger telling them why it would be a jolly good idea, don't you know, to charge the enemy and hit them for 6. His legs wanted to stand to attention. Prehistoric men would have worshipped her, and in fact had amazingly managed to carve lifelike statues of her thousands of years ago. She had a mass of chestnut hair, a wig, Vimes learned later. No one who had much to do with dragons kept their own hair for long. She also had a dragon on her shoulder. It had been introduced as Talenthrust Vincent Wonderkind of Quirm, referring to as Vinny, and seemed to be making a large contribution to the unusual chemical smell that pervaded the house. This smell permeated everything, even the generous slice of cake she offered him tasted of it. The shoulder, it looks very nice, he said, desperate to make conversation. Rubbish, said her ladyship. I'm just training him up because shoulder sitters fetch twice the price. Vimes murmured that he had occasionally seen society ladies with small, colourful dragons on their shoulders and thought it looked very, nice. Oh, it sounds nice, she said. I'll grant you. Then they realize it means soot burns, frizzled hair, and crap all down their back. Those talons dig in too. And then they think the thing's getting too big and smelly, and the next thing you know, it's either down to the Moorpork Sunshine Sanctuary for lost dragons, or the old heave-ho into the river with a rope around your neck. Poor little buggers. She sat down, arranging a skirt that could have made sails for a small fleet. Now then, Captain Vimes, was it? Vimes was at a loss. Ramkins, long dead, stared down at him from the ornate frames high on the shadowy walls. Between, around, and under the portraits were the weapons they'd presumably used, and had used, well and often by the look of them. Suits of armour stood in dented ranks along the walls. Quite a number, he couldn't help noticing, had large holes in them. The ceiling was a faded riot of moth-eaten banners. You did not need forensic examination to understand that Lady Ramkin's ancestors had never shirked a fight. It was amazing that she was capable of doing something so unwarlike as having a cup of tea. My forebears, she said, following his hypnotized gaze. You know, not one Ramkin in the last 1,000 years has died in his bed. Yes, ma'am. Source of family pride, that. Yes, ma'am. Quite a few of them have died in other people's, of course. Captain Vimes's teacup rattled in its saucer. Clink, 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 clink. Yes, ma'am, he said. Captain is such a dashing title. I've always thought. She gave him a bright, brittle smile. I mean, colonels and so on are always so stuffy. Majors are pompous. But one always feels, somehow, that there is something delightfully dangerous about a captain. What was it you had to show me? Vimes gripped his parcel like a chastity belt. I wondered, he faltered, how big swamp, he stopped. Something dreadful was happening to his lower regions. Lady Ramkin followed his gaze. Oh, take no notice of Bun, she said cheerfully. Hit him with a cushion if he's a bother. A small, elderly dragon had crawled out from under his chair and placed its jowly muzzle in Vimes's lap. It stared up at him soulfully, with big brown eyes, and gently dribbled something quite corrosive, by the feel of it, over his knees, and it stank like the ring around an acid bath. That's Dewdrop Maybelline Talon Thrust the First, said her ladyship. Champion and sire of champions. No fire left now, poor soppy old thing. He likes his belly rubbed. Vimes made surreptitiously vicious, jerking motions to dislodge the old dragon.
Surreptitiously.
Surreptitiously. Adverb in a way that attempts to avoid notice or attention secretively. Vimes made surreptitiously vicious, jerking motions to dislodge the old dragon. It blinked mournfully at him with the rheumy eyes and rolled back the corner of its mouth, exposing a picket fence of soot-blackened teeth.
Rheumy.
Rheumy, R-H-E-U-M-Y, of a person's eyes, watery. It blinked mournfully at him with rheumy eyes and rolled back the corner of its mouth, exposing a picket fence of soot-blackened teeth. Just push him off if he's a nuisance, said Lady Ramkin cheerfully. Now then, what was it you were asking? I was wondering how big swamp dragons grow, said Vimes, trying to shift position. There was a faint growling noise. You came all the way here to ask me that? Well, I seem to recall Gay Heart Talon Thrust of Ankh stood 14 thumbs high, toe to Metiok, mused Lady Ramkin.
Meshiach.
About 3 foot 6 inches, she added kindly. No bigger than that, said Vimes hopefully. In his lap, the old dragon began to snore gently. Golly, no. He was a bit of a freak, actually. Mostly they don't get much bigger than 8 thumbs. Captain Vimes's lips moved in hurried calculation. 2 feet, he ventured. Well done. That's the cobs, of course. The hens are a bit smaller. Captain Vimes wasn't going to give in. A cob would be a male dragon, he said. Only after the age of 2 years, said Lady Ramkin triumphantly. Up to the age of 8 months. He's a pumit. Then he's a cock until 14 months. Then he's a snood. Captain Vimes sat entranced, eating the horrible cake, breeches gradually dissolving as the stream of information flooded over him. How the males fought with flame, but in the laying season only the hens breathed fire, from the combustion of complex intestinal gases to incubate the eggs which needed such a fierce temperature. While the males gathered firewood, a group of swamp dragons was a slump or an embarrassment. A female was capable of laying up to 3 clutches of 4 eggs every year, most of which were trodden on by absent-minded males, and that dragons, only until their 3rd clutch, of course. After that, they are dams. Of both sexes were vaguely uninterested in one another, and indeed everything except firewood, except for about once every 2 months, when they became as single-minded as a buzzsaw. He was helpless to prevent himself being taken out to the kennels at the back, outfitted from neck to ankle in leather armor faced with steel plates, and ushered into the long, low building where the whistling had come from. The temperature was terrible, but not as bad as the cocktail of smells. He staggered aimlessly from one metal-lined pen to another, while pear-shaped, squeaking little horrors with red eyes were introduced as Moonpenny Duchess Mark Payne, who's gravid at the moment, and Moon Mist Talon Thrust the Second, who was best of breed at Pseudopolis last year. Jets of pale green flame played across his knees. Many of the stalls had rosettes and certificates pinned over them. And this one, I'm afraid, is good boy Bindle Featherstone of Quirm, said Lady Ramkin relentlessly. Vimes stared groggily over the charred barrier at the small creature curled up in the middle of the floor. It bore about the same resemblance to the rest of them as Nobby did to the average human being. Something in its ancestry had given it a pair of eyebrows that were about the same size as its stubby wings, which could never have supported it in the air. Its head was the wrong shape, like an anteater. It had nostrils like jet intakes. If it ever managed to get airborne, the things would have the drag of twin parachutes. It was also turning on Captain Vimes the most silently intelligent look he'd ever had from any animal, including Corporal Nobbs. "It happens," said Lady Ramkin sadly. "It's all down to genes, you know." "It is," said Vimes. Somehow the creature seemed to be concentrating all the power its siblings wasted in flame and noise into a stare like a thermic lance. It couldn't help remembering how much he'd wanted a puppy when he was a little boy. Mind you, they'd been starving anything with meat on it. Anything with meat on it would have done. He heard the dragon lady say, "One tries to breed for a good flame, depth of scale, correct color, and so on. One just has to put up with the occasional total whittle." The little dragon turned on Vimes's a gaze that would be guaranteed to win it the award for dragon the judges would most like to take home and use as a portable gas lighter. Total whittle, Vimes thought. He wasn't sure of the precise meaning of the word, but he could hazard a shrewd guess. It sounded like whatever it was you had left when you had extracted everything of any value whatsoever, like the watch, he thought. Total whittles. Every one of them. And just like him, it was the saga of his life. "That's nature for you," said her ladyship. "Of course, I wouldn't dream of breeding from him, but he wouldn't be able to anyway." "Why not?" said Vimes. "Because dragons have to mate in the air, and he'll never be able to fly with those wings, I'm afraid. I'll be sorry to lose the bloodline naturally. His sire was Brenda Rodley's Treebite Brightscale. Do you know Brenda?" No," said Vimes. Lady Ramkin was one of those people who assumed that everyone else knew everyone one knew. Lady Ramkin was one of those people who assumed that everyone else knew everyone one knew. Charming gel. Anyway, his brothers and sisters are shaping up very well. Poor little bastards, thought Vimes. That's nature for you in a nutshell, always dealing off the bottom of the pack. No wonder they call her a mother. "You said you had something to show me?" Lady Ramkin prompted. Vimes wordlessly handed her the parcel. She slipped off her heavy mittens and unwrapped it. Plaster cast of a footprint, she said baldly. Well? Does it remind you of anything? Said Vimes. Could be a wadding bird. Oh, Vimes was crestfallen.
Waiting.
Wade, walk with effort through water or another liquid or viscous substance. Could be a wading bird. Oh, Vimes was crestfallen. Lady Ramkin laughed. Or a really big dragon? Got it out of a museum, did you? No, I got it off the street this morning. Ha! Someone's been playing tricks on you, old chap. There was, circumstantial evidence. He told her. She stared at him. Draco nobilis, she said hoarsely. Pardon, said Vimes. Draco nobilis, the noble dragon, as opposed to these fellows. She waved a hand in the direction of the massed ranks of whistling lizards. Draco vulgaris, the lot of them, but the big ones are all gone, you know. This really is nonsense. No two ways about it. All gone. Beautiful things they were, weighed tons, biggest things ever to fly. No one knows how they did it. And then they realized. It was suddenly very quiet. All along the rows of kennels, the dragons were silent, bright-eyed and watchful. They were staring at the roof. Carrot looked around him. Shelves stretched away in every direction. On those shelves, books. He made a calculated guess. This is the library, isn't it? He said. The librarian maintained his gentle but firm grip on the boy's hand and led him along the maze of aisles. Is there a body? Said Carrot. There'd have to be. Worse than murder. A body in a library. It could lead to anything. The ape eventually padded to a halt in front of a shelf, no different than, it seemed, 100 others. Some of the books were chained up. There was a gap. The librarian pointed to it. Ook! Well, what about it? A hole where a book should be. Ook! A book has been taken. A book has been taken. You summoned the watch. Carrot drew himself up proudly. Because someone's taken a book. You think that's worse than murder? The librarian gave him the kind of look other people would reserve for people who said things like, "What's so bad about genocide?" This is practically a criminal offense, wasting watch time, said Carrot. Why don't you just tell the head wizard or whoever they are? Ook! The librarian indicated with some surprisingly economical gestures that most wizards would not find their own bottoms with both hands. Well, I don't see what we can do about it, said Carrot. What's the book called? The librarian scratched his head. This one was going to be tricky. He faced Carrot, put his leather glove hands together, then folded them open. I know it's a book. What's its name? The librarian sighed and held up a hand. 4 words, said Carrot. First word. The ape pinched 2 wrinkled fingers together. Small word. Ah, the, for, ook. The second word. Third word, small word. The, to, off, fro, off. The something of something. Second word, what? Oh, first syllable. Fingers. Touching your fingers. Thumbs. The orangutan growled and tugged theatrically at one large, hairy ear. Oh, sounds like fingers. Hand, adding up. Sums, cut off. Smaller word. Some. Second syllable. Small, very small syllable. In, on. Some, on. Some, on. Summon, summoner, summoning. The summoning of something. Oh, this is fun, isn't it? Fourth word, whole word. He peered intently as the librarian gyrated mysteriously. Big thing, huge big thing, flapping, great big flapping leaping thing. Teeth, huffing, blowing, great big huge blowing flapping thing. Sweat broke out on Carrot's forehead as he tried obediently to understand. Sucking fingers thing, burnt, hot, great big hot, blowing, flapping thing. The librarian rolled his eyes. Homo sapiens, you could keep it. The great dragon danced and spun and trod the air over the city. Its color was moonlight, gleaming off its scales. Sometimes it would twist and glide with deceptive speed over the rooftops for the sheer joy of existing. And it was all wrong, Vimes thought. Part of him was marveling at the sheer beauty of the sight, but an insistent, weaselly little group of brain cells from the wrong side of the synapses was scrawling its graffiti on the walls of wonderment. It's a bloody great lizard, they jeered. Must weigh tons. Nothing that big can fly, not even on beautiful wings. And what is a flying lizard doing with great big scales on its back? 500 feet above him, a lance of blue-white flame roared into the sky. It can't do something like that. It'd burn its own lips off. Beside him, Lady Ramkin stood with her mouth open. Behind her, the little caged dragons yammered and howled. The great beast turned in the air and swooped over the rooftops. The flame darted out again. Below it, yellow flames sprang up. It was done so quietly and stylishly that it took Vimes several seconds to realize that several buildings had in fact been set on fire. "Golly," said Lady Ramkin, "look, it's using the thermals. That's what the fire is for." She turned to Vimes, her eyes hopelessly aglow. "Do you realize we're very probably seeing something that no one has seen for centuries?" "Yes, it's a bloody flying alligator setting fire to my city!" shouted Vimes. She wasn't listening to him. "There must be a breeding colony somewhere," she said. "After all this time, where do you think it lives?" Vimes didn't know, but he swore to himself that he would find out and ask it some very serious questions. "One egg," breathed the breeder. "Just let me get my hands on one egg." Vimes stared at her in genuine astonishment. It dawned on him that he was very probably a flawed character. Below them, another building exploded into flame. "How far exactly?" he said, speaking very slowly and carefully as to a child. "Did these things fly?" "They're very territorial animals," murmured her ladyship. "According to legend, they—" Vimes realized he was in for another dose of dragon lore. "Just give me the facts, milady," he said impatiently. "Not very far, really," she said, slightly taken aback. "Thank you very much, ma'am. You've been very helpful," muttered Vimes, and broke into a run. Somewhere in the city, there was nothing outside for miles except low fields and swamp. It had to be living somewhere in the city. His sandals flapped on the cobbles as he hurtled down the streets. Somewhere in the city, which was totally ridiculous, of course. Totally ridiculous and impossible. He didn't deserve this. Of all the cities in all the world it could have flown into, he thought, it's flown into mine.